Okay, Mark. So we talked about that you learned your trade from your father and from the firm you were working for. So you got made redundant in 2016 and you've been punting ever since. I was going to ask if that was a big decision to make, but it was basically made for you.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you brought that inside knowledge of form to turn against your, to get a poacher turn gamekeeper or vice versa.
Yes, I certainly was using the knowledge I'd picked up, and it's been such a long time, 17 years I've been working in form analysis and pricing and trading. So yes, I had that knowledge base to start me off. And to be honest, it was the bookmaking industry for me was becoming less and less interesting and exciting for the reasons I mentioned, that as my job was becoming more and more automated, I suppose, it was becoming more clerical in a way, rather than I was having less and less input into pricing and risk management decisions and all of that kind of thing. So in a sense, the fun had gone out of it. So I didn't have a clear, roadmap or timeline or anything. But I thought one day I'm going to have to, if I'm going to get the same enjoyment and fulfillment as I got out of the game as when I entered the game, I was going to have to do something different, and that was going to have to be my own. But as you say, the decision was made for me as to the timing. I wasn't expecting that to happen, but once it did, I would say within a month I was giving it a go on my own. So I certainly didn't plan to be punting for a living at the end of 2016. But once that decision was made for me, I had been in some sense prepared for it. So I was ready to go, and there was nothing else I really wanted to do at the age I was at either. So yes, I jumped in.
So you saw that the professional punters that used to be able to get onto lumps were having their wings drastically clipped. Did that not sort of put you off a bit, thinking that, how are you going to get, or did you bring some sort of inside knowledge of the industry to help you get around those problems?
Yes, I'm not going to claim that every bet I've ever had has been under my own name, but the risk departments of the bookmakers are pretty smart. It only takes a handful of bets for your account to be flagged up these days. That said, we're lucky in Australia, I think, compared to the UK, and then we've got minimum bet limits. So after 9 a.m. on metropolitan racing in Australia, in most states anyway, they have to bet you to lose at least $2,000. So that's, and with the range of firms you can get on with, that gives you a bit of leeway. Against that, we're experiencing a bit of consolidation in the market at the moment of late in Australia. So, that's going to be a problem. It's going to get harder and harder to get on. I think the minimum bet laws are a great thing. I just can't see a reason why they're not in place everywhere. It just seems it's not huge sums of money, $2,000, especially on big metropolitan racing. And it's time limited. It doesn't come into place until 9 a.m. on race morning. So I think it's more than fair to the bookmakers, and it does give the punter at least some chance.
I was going to mention, because obviously restricted punters in the UK look with envy at that minimum bet rule in Australia. And I was going to ask, is it as good as it sounds? I mean, do you notice that the margins are a lot bigger at that as soon as that point comes?
The margins have increased, but I'm not sure. I should point out, I was actually in the industry when the limits first came in, and it didn't impact on our profits at all. I mean, I was working at Sportsbet, which had merged with Paddy Power and then Betfair. So it was a monstrously huge company, that held an absolute fortune. But the impact on revenue was negligible, if anything. At our company anyway. It may have been different at other shops, but I didn't see any effect on revenue. Sorry, what was the original part of your question?
Well, I was just saying that the restricted punters in the UK, and there's apparently a lot of them, look with envy at the minimum bet Australian rules, and just wondering if the bookmakers,
margins, right.
The margins are sort of too skinny to make it value.
Look, when I was at Sportsbet, I don't think we added much margin to allow for the introduction of minimum bet limits. The biggest impact on overrounds in early markets in recent times in Australia has been the winding up of fees and taxation on the bookies, both by governments and racing authorities. All the different state racing bodies have imposed race fields fees, which is a bit of a nebulous term, but it's just a way of charging bookmakers. That's quite onerous. They get charged either on turnover or gross profit on a meeting, whichever is the higher. So they could actually have a losing day in the book on a meeting and have to pay a percentage of their hold. But conversely, if they have a big winning day, they'll be charged something, somewhere between 15 and 30% of their gross profits on the day. So they get them either way. And in addition to that, in the last 2 to 3 years, various state governments have decided they want a piece of the action as well and have introduced point of consumption tax. So if someone's in Victoria, for instance, and has a bet on any race or sporting event anywhere in the world, because they were physically in Victoria when they had that bet, the bookmaker gets charged, I think it's 8% in Victoria on turnover. So that's just another way in which the screws have been wound up in them, and that's fed into their margin, and they've been quite clever about it too, I think, because they've fed a lot of that extra margin they're putting into their books into the top end of the market, the top 3 or 4 chances in each race. I don't think you'll see much impact on the prices of outsiders. A 33 to 1 chance is still going to be, they'll still bet 33 to 1 about, but the 2 to 1 shots they're betting 6 to 4 about. So they've really funneled a lot of their percentage into that end of the market. That had a big impact on me because I like to back a lot of favourites and had a really good run doing so in 17 and 18 in the early markets in particular, but that avenue is just getting harder and harder to find an edge in.
Okay, so let's talk about your betting. Do you specialise in anything in particular?
Yes, well, it's New South Wales racing, Sydney and New South Wales racing, which is odd because I'm from Melbourne in Victoria. But the reason for that is for the last, I would say, it would have been about 9 or 10 years of my corporate career, I was first for IAS, then Sportsbet, either the head trader or one of the head traders for Sydney racing. Because when you're in a firm like that, obviously you're assigned a different state. Everyone's assigned a different state to work on, and for me it was New South Wales for about 9 years, I think. I was the head trader of New South Wales at Sportsbet for quite a few years. So when the time came to go out on my own, there didn't seem to be any point in changing to betting on Melbourne and Victorian racing, just because I live here. I built up so much experience and knowledge of Sydney racing that's what I wanted to stick with. The disadvantage I'm at is that I can't actually go to the track in Sydney, obviously being Melbourne based, and I might be disadvantaging myself by not going to learning the pool of horses down here in Melbourne and actually going to the races and getting all the advantages that brings you as well. But I really like Sydney racing. I'm very comfortable with it, and I'm certainly sticking with it for the foreseeable future.
What would your main focus be? Is it speed figures, form, watching the videos?
All of the above. I keep my own ratings database, which is derived, I suppose you'd call them speed figures. It's time, class, and weight, a bit of a blend of the 3. So I'm not as strictly chained to time and sectional time as some other people who approach it that way, but it's certainly the cornerstone of the approach. And yes, video analysis is key as well. I think that the ratings and the database are the most important thing, because the way I like to do the form, I like to have a number to tie it to at the end of the day. I mean, I like to be quite flexible in how I use those numbers, but when I come to pricing a race, I like to have a number that aligns to something in my database the way I do it, that gives me something to hang my hat on and a solid foundation to price from.
Okay, so what is the most important aspect of form to take into account when you're looking for a bet?
The single most important is the horse's intrinsic ability. And with my database, I'm confident that I've got a fair handle on what that is, or what it potentially is. But that is far from the whole story, obviously. Then you get into issues like pace and speed maps, jockey ability, trainer ability, fitness, just a myriad of form factors that I think everyone, whether they're doing the form in a more old-fashioned manner like me, or they're modelling, it's all about weighting these variables. and there's different form factors. I probably take a more manual, labour-intensive approach, I suppose. But it's, in a sense, it's the same thing the modelers are doing, their regression theory and so on. And it's just all about weighting variables, and how you approach that's up to you. But at the end of the day, it's all about how you come up with a price and if you can find value, I suppose.
Well, that leads me nicely on to my next. Do you price your own races before looking at the actual market?
Yes, I do. Yes. That's not to say I pay no heed to the market, but certainly the first cut is done before I've seen a set of prices. Yes.
And I assume that's a skill you learned when you were working in Darwin.
Yes, it was. Those books by Don Scott I mentioned before from the 70s and 80s had sort of a rudimentary pricing method in it. Probably a bit unfair to say rudimentary. It was very sophisticated for its time. And I'd sort of messed about with that in my teens around that age, trying to have a go at it, but I didn't have the same ratings or database background or knowledge at that point. So, yeah, it was pretty primitive stuff. Of course, when I moved into the bookmaking industry, there's a lot more hanging on it. If you're pricing a race and you're going to go to market and trade based on those set of prices, it's incumbent upon you to get them as right as you can. So, yes, having the decade and a half of experience doing that is certainly standing me in good stead now, I'd say.
And are you confident enough in your own ability that if you see something that's sticking out badly, to take real advantage of it, or do you doubt that maybe you've got it wrong?
I think you have to back yourself in that situation. Naturally, you're not going to be right all the time. But if experience has shown that you're right often enough, and when you do get those big edges, if they have paid dividends for you, then that gives you more confidence the next time that they appear. But yeah, I think second guessing yourself in that situation is, I think you should be, as I said, the market needs to be respected to a certain extent. And you shouldn't be too cavalier. But if you're not going to back yourself in a situation where you're confident in your set of prices and there's a big difference, then you might as well not do it, really.
Okay, you mentioned that all the bets that you've ever had aren't always in your name. I mean, is it got to be a bit clandestine, or do you just wait until you can get the lumps on in the morning?
Well, betting in the morning's become less and less lucrative in the Australian marketplace these days, and you are in most cases, I was in a lot of cases, a better waiting until the last 5 minutes when liquidity's up in the exchange, the market's more settled, and the market overround is actually easing a little bit. You know, see, we're sort of dealing with high 120s at 9, 125 to 130% at 9 in the morning, and that will almost always be sub 115 or 16 by start time. So that's a pretty significant difference. And as I said, with them funneling a lot of that extra percentage into the favourites, if you want to back a favourite, in a lot of cases, you're going to have to wait.